I've been having problems with the electric brakes in this trailer. There's an intermittent short that's causing issues. I looked at the wiring and I didn't see anything obvious. So in this video, we're going to dig a little bit deeper with power tools. Now under here is the wiring for the trailer brakes. Still not too easy to get to. Let's get a little more visibility. Now we can see these wires pretty well, but then they go under here. So let's look at that a little better too. Now I can see the wires, but they go into the axle. I got to the source of my problem. These are the wires inside those axle tubes. There's bare shiny copper, worn out and almost broken through there. That one's broken clean off. So all I have to do is replace these wires and my brake should work again. Oh, and I may have some re-welding to do too, if I want the wheels to be on the frame. Now I didn't do all this cutting just to get to the wires. I also had a problem with the way this trailer was built from the factory. Let's go back in time a little bit and I'll show you. Even behind a reasonably large vehicle like a Suburban, that fender and tire stick out past the entire side of the vehicle. From outside of fender to outside of fender, this thing's about 8.5 feet wide. I don't necessarily mind it being wide, but I never use that width, because everything I load has to fit between the fenders. So all the width from here to the end is useless. Doesn't help me at all. So now I'm going to correct that issue and make the whole thing narrower. This inner rail is the same C-channel as this outer rail. So I figure that's the perfect size to turn this whole thing into a box. I can use my cuts on either side to line it up. I'm just shifting the whole thing inward. These two pieces didn't go together perfectly. I think it's this weld bead on the suspension bracket, making that just a little bit wider. So I'm going to mark the bottom of the flange where these go. We'll make just a little bit of clearance in that bottom flange. Now, these two pieces line up pretty nicely. That's a gap I can live with. Normally I'm willing to weld through a lot of things, but I want this to be pretty strong, so I'm actually going to go through the extra effort and clean off the rust and dirt here. Before welding, not while welding with the welder. I've got this channel lined up for this project. I already cut the size, but it's the exact stuff I need for the trailer. This will be a problem for future me. I need to add a piece here, but it's hard to hold. So I'm going to add a clamp. With the small end of the clamp all the way on this piece, the large end has a little bit of a ledge sticking out. That way when I put my new piece in, it's got a shelf to rest on. And now it's pretty close already. I just have to do the final adjustment. I just tack welded this on for now. I want to check the tire clearance, because I know there's less, but I want to see if there's enough. I think that'll be fine. Yep. Not the most convenient way to change a tire, but still possible. It's like one of those old cars with the low rear fenders. About like that. I saw a piece of tubing here, I think. This might work. Let's see if it'll fit inside my axle tube here. Oh, close. But I don't need it to be too tight. I just need it to be a guide. What about that one? Perfect. I took the piece of exhaust tubing and put a slit down it. So basically this is now a 2-inch diameter roll pin and it'll work well for alignment. All right, slide that in there. Now we slide the whole thing in here, and as I push them together, that will get in alignment. Going to put the axles back together, I noticed two problems. First, I did a plus instead of a minus and got my measurement wrong. I was measuring to the inside of the rail, then I transferred the measurement to this U-bolt in order to measure the axle. I think I flipped the direction, because I'm short in the middle here, which is okay, we can fix that. The other thing I noticed, this side's real easy to line up. I didn't loosen those U-bolts up. Apparently, my axle was ready to fall off the trailer, and I never noticed. Kind of glad I did this now. I happened to be walking by and I looked down this way, and I realized that new channel I put on has a curve to it. That was bent. I'm going to firmly ignore that one. Nothing to fix here. What I'll focus on is all the other things that need to go. Those taillights stick out, spare tire, all that needs to be trimmed back. I sawed off a chunk of the old axle material to fill the gap. I put my exhaust pipe roll pin through that. Because these are in springs, you can flex them quite a bit. Then we can use that centerpiece to maneuver that pin in. A little more wiggling, a little more shoving. I've got the pieces there with a little bit aligning in the middle, but I need more alignment than this. I cut off a chunk of hefty angle iron. Angle is good because it gives you a V groove, and a round thing will center itself up there. Now this side is rigid, this side is wobbly. Now the whole thing is held solidly in place. We can go ahead and weld things up here. I left a little gap so weld will actually fall in between and really fill that up. I did a little tack welds around so the contraction of the weld doesn't warp this tube. Now I've got tacks on 3 sides so I can start filling it in. I want to point out one of my rules of life is don't get squished. I have many straps going and attaching the forks to the frame. There's a safety strap going to a different part of the forklift. That is thick plate steel, that's not going anywhere. I wouldn't go anywhere near this if I didn't think it was pretty safe. After I welded the axle all the way around, went and put those braces back on and welded them in. I like the way they stiffened it up. Figure being permanent is a good idea. These are my old taillights. They used to stick out the side. But sticking out the side is never going to work for getting it skinny. There is a cross channel underneath here, and I found some very skinny little lights that'll fit it. They even have the DOT stamping and everything. So they'll fit right there. I was worried about the visibility because of the ramp might get in a little bit of the way. You can only see half the light next to it. Luckily, these are cheap and came in a 4-pack. So I'm gonna install them in pairs, 2 on each side. That way if they're half covered up, 2 halves will make a whole. I still got a good light. Looks like this C channel is gonna protect these lights really well. I probably won't break them. And if I do break them, I've got a spare on each side. Got my wiring in. Let's see if it actually works. We got blinking, and that is definitely visible. I'm actually shooting into the sun, and you can still see those lights. Looks like we have brakes. No shorting. So far it seems fine. The next question is, will it still work to haul cars? Let's go find a car. Yeah, I just realized it might start rolling on me. I think I'm gonna be in here with the emergency brake, just in case. The emergency brake work on this? Yeah. Okay. It's been a few miles of washboard road. So far the trailer is holding up fine. And the car is staying on there. Tires haven't hit the rocker panel. Everything's working. Just a few hundred miles to go.
The next day I got to do a lot of test driving. I expected to be better, but this was way better.
I used to drive by washing the rear fenders and the mirrors, make sure the trailer was in the center of the lane. It's wherever I am now. I really don't have to think about it too much. I just pretty much drive where I want to go, and I go there.
Construction zones were now totally stress-free. I never worried about hitting cone at all. Construction zones missing pavement were also stress-free. The thing towed totally fine.
A lot of people have hit this center barrier, but I'm not going to.
I used to have to be very careful in small gas stations, worried the fenders might catch on something and being able to turn sharp enough to get out. It is far better now. Even if you happen to have a yard where you need to maneuver around a 34-foot long bus, much easier. No problem at all.
I didn't really give it a whole lot of thought ahead of time. When I winched this car on and got to the top of a tire, it would roll down the other side. Luckily, the emergency brake worked. I could always use boards or something to stop it. Now, when I unload, normally I use the winch to just gently roll the car off. But we got a bump in the road. I hadn't actually thought about that at all. No plan on how to get this off. Let's come up with one. Of course, a good chunk of this car's engine is in the back, so it doesn't run. There's no chance of driving this thing off. I've run the winch cable under the car to the rear of the trailer where I put a pulley and hooked that to the back of the car. So if I pull my winch that way, the car will go this way. Let's see how this works. I gotta be inside manning the brake though. Because once it goes over that tire, it's gone. Nothing's holding it back. That didn't sound good. Let's see it broke. The cable slipped off the pulley. That doesn't help. I have the e-brake on, I have blocks in, I have this car secured, so it's not going to roll over me. At least it shouldn't. Okay, I'm gonna have to pull. I never let it go forward to release that one. Huh. Okay. This is complicated. Got the cable straightened out. Apparently the hanging down was the issue. So we're gonna pre-tension it just a little bit. There, I think that'll stay. Let's try this again. Using the brakes to hold. Now I gotta worry about that pulley again. Use a board from the side this time. Didn't go smoothly, but it did go. I'm working on a potential plan here to make it a little easier to load and unload. I've got a jack under one axle. The suspension is all twisted one way. That tire's up pretty high. Still has a couple inches of spring travel, but I also have a couple inches of clearance. I'm gonna fiddle with this idea tonight, think about it overnight, and actually do some welding in the morning. My tentative plan is to make the fenders in two pieces, the full width of the entire rail here. They're going to make these pieces of tubing here, and they're going to hinge and be collapsible. So I can drop the whole fender down to tire level, that way I can fit a low car on easy. Which means I need 8 of these pieces. I need them to all be the same. I've got my tubing in the saw. I'm going to make a mark at 10 inches, another one at 30. And I cut right through the 31. My 10-inch mark goes right on the edge of my bending die. This bender has a dial on it, and you're supposed to stop it when you get to the angle you want. A lot of times I get bored and distracted while I do this, and I forget to look. The other thing I have is a hydraulic cylinder, and it runs out of travel at a little over 30 degrees. So that's the exact number I use for making all these parts. That way I can, oh yeah, don't have to worry about stopping it on time. That'll be the same every time. Now I got this mill set up, so I put that same 10-inch mark at the end of the jaw. Now I have a stack of 8 very consistent parts ready to be assembled. And I didn't have to do any of that tedious measuring or paying attention part. That works for me. I've got my multiple arms in place. About 6.5 inches up is level, so I got a 5.5-inch piece of wood with a 1-inch tube on it. I cut a piece of 1-inch tube to go all the way across, and that fits that fish mouth section. We've got some random pieces of stock clamped to the side of the trailer to keep this in position side to side. On the two ends where they're going to meet, I cut an angle on either one to take into account the corner radius on the inside of these pieces of angle. These two are bolted together, and they drop in place right in that gap. And now, this side has everything in position, so I'll tack that up, then move these supports forward to this one, and eventually this will all go together. Now, take all these braces out. Take the bolts out. Let's see what happens. That's pretty much what I was going for. I got lumps of weld filling the entire joint area on both ends.
Now that the pieces are welded together fully, I'm going to cut them apart again. At least one piece.
Now the reason I cut the bar out from here is I needed it right there. I welded the bar in right here. That way these are removable, and I could put a pin in so they become a pivot. But now this bar is awfully close to this tire. If you notice, I only welded it on the end. That's going to cut out the center again. I could slide this in place. Now I've got all my tire clearance back. Have pins I can remove. And that makes the hinge. And because every time I welded it, it was one solid piece, I know for sure everything's in alignment. I'll save the spare pieces in my bin. I'll use them for something else. I've got my panels I cut out of the trailer.
My plan was to pre-bend the panel using the weight of the Jeep pressing between these boards. But the panel was a lot stronger than I expected. This didn't work at all. Oh well. Next plan.
I've added lumps of weld in the general area that I want to be held together. But now the bars curve down and the panel doesn't. It's like a diving board. Gonna try clamps. After repeatedly doing it wrong a number of times, I realized that clamping on the edge is never gonna work because I don't have enough of an overlap. So I clamped a piece of stock across the whole thing with a clamp on either side. This worked well. That's definitely close enough. Each original side panel did have a seam in it, so I tried to place that over the bend to make that a little bit easier. Their old welds held up pretty well. The other half of the panel didn't have any seam in it, so I had to bend it as is. A little more difficult, but same concept, and it worked fine. Now I've been worried the way I clamped those on, and these are flat, it's going to make this whole thing spring out. So, took out the bolts. Let's see what happens. That's fine. I'm not entirely sure how I want to do these hinge pins, so I'm going the easy way for now. I'm going to make a mark on either side. I'm going to drill a hole through that mark. And all the way through the whole tube. Take a cotter pin and stuff it through the whole thing. And now my hinge pin is installed. I'll probably upgrade it later, but for now this will work. When I tested out this trailer, I'd run all new wire, but I attached everything with wire nuts. That was for two reasons. One, I was running low on time and that was fast. And two, on something new that you're not sure about whether it's going to work, wire nuts are a quick and easy way to throw it together, then you can take it apart and reconfigure it if needed. And you can do that on the road. But now I know this system works, so I'm going to connect them a little bit better. I really like the concept of these solder seal connectors, and I've used them a lot, and I found out if they're exposed to light, the insulation all comes apart. It just flakes off. Here's one of those connectors. I only installed this a couple years ago. This is all cracked and breaking up. The insulation just peels right off. These do not survive in sun at all. So I'm going to add a piece of regular shrink tubing over top of it. Got to remember to put that heat shrink on first before you make the connection. I'm going to shove it out of the way so it doesn't get hot when I install this one. I also found some big diameter thick wall heat shrink tubing. I'm going to slide that over this one. Starting to see the metal flow around in there. You can see the metal flow through the strands of wire, so I feel pretty good about that connection. Now we'll do the next round of heat shrink tubing. And then we'll use this big piece to really seal the deal. Now I feel pretty good about that brake connection. I think I can ignore that for a lot of years. I'm going to start doing touch-up paint in this trailer, and one piece I'm going to paint is this one, which you haven't seen yet. I actually made this piece a while back. It's just a piece of tread plate with a fairly light tubing framework and some pieces of angle on the end. And the point of this is to go in the middle here and just drop across. Anywhere I want to put it, now I can drive short vehicles across sideways. At the same time, I also extended that just a few inches and added a couple little bits on the side. Just a little piece of fairly thick wall angle. I think it's 1 by 1 or so. It's amazing how much better welds go when you take the paint and rust off first. I can just pull my ramps out, hook them here and here, and with the slot I have a little bit of adjustment and width. Then I can drive something sideways. and I can still get to all my tie-down points. And whenever I hook up this trailer, all my wire connections and everything are on the driver's side of the vehicle. And the jack is on the passenger side. After I back up, from over here, lowering the jack onto the trailer ball, I gotta go around the whole thing to get to this side where my trailer connections are. I don't see why I have to do that. I'm gonna move that trailer jack over here so everything's on the same side. That's something I should have done years ago. Now I'll have more room on this side to put my spare tire. That'll be better. Apparently this takes a lot more winch power. I grab my pulley again. This time I'm going to the car and back to the trailer. So this is going to cut the speed in half, but double the pulling power. I'm about to drop over this, so I'm going to go inside and man the emergency brake. This is working. Now let's take a look where we're at. I totally missed the alignment. The vehicle's way off to that side. I wasn't paying attention to the tires. This one's almost falling off. But that's okay. If I tried to match tire to tire like I did last time, this thing would have fallen off them and I would have been stuck. These make it better. Now there's not enough room to lift these up and connect them together. And I can't leave them down while driving because the tires will run into them. But now, the car will be my fenders. I can just remove these entirely, throw them inside the car while I'm transporting it, and put them back on when I go to unload. So far, I'm liking this. It's a definite improvement. Apparently, by having the car so far off to the side, I managed to tweak this fender. These don't line up perfectly anymore. This side, no problem at all. They line right back up. I already had the bender set up, so I just took one of the pieces next to the saw, bent the right angle into it, and now I can compare. I added a clamp to keep this end from pushing up. Could be done with a piece of chain or a tie-down strap or something. Now I can use the jack to lift the bend part up, the clamp to push this end down, and I can tweak this thing right back into shape. Probably could use a block stack there and just clamp downwards, or a ratchet strap or anything would probably do this. Just have to get the right twisting motion. That is very close. I think I'm going to call that one good. Check the other ones while I'm here. Oh, that one needs a little tweak. move my stuff over here. Nice, that one's fixed. On this other side, looked okay, but it did get a little bit of a tweak to it. Not too bad, but might as well straighten it while I've got everything out. I found that tweaking it till it's bent too far, about half a tube width, makes it spring back just right. So I think we're good there. Yep, that's perfect now. This bend here is the weak area it's trying to straighten out. So what I need to do is triangulate the whole thing by adding a brace right about here. I don't know how big or what size I need. I do happen to have a brand new piece of flat bar. This is left over when I was widening my tractor rims. This happens to be 6 feet long. I need 8 of those braces. If you divide 6 feet by 8, you end up with 9-inch long pieces, which makes me realize the brace I need is exactly 9 inches long. This is perfect. I've got all my braces welded in, and I went diagonally across where this weak bend is. That way it'll take this 1-inch high section and turn it effectively into over 3 inches high. So it's gonna be a lot stronger. Now, I don't know exactly how much stronger it is, but I also don't know exactly how much I need. So if you take the difference between what I added, which I don't know, and what I need, which I don't know, it works out to almost exactly good enough. So we're done here. When I originally painted this trailer, I painted it with Rust-Oleum. That way, if I ever need to touch it up, I can just take a rattle can and touch it up and not have to paint the whole thing. Got a rattle can. We're gonna try touching it up and see how that works. I threw a tarp over the tires. Masking done. Took 2 rattle cans, but it's pretty presentable now. Not perfect, but it's a trailer. Some places I park this, I'm surprised when it's still there when I come back. Definitely don't want it looking too nice. This one went on easy, no harder than before at all, and arguably is safer because now we have a tire on either side of these fenders. I could probably leave that Jeep in neutral and it would just bouncing back and forth between the fenders here, at least most of the time. So I like that. Let's do some off-roading to celebrate.
Oh, I'm not driving the Jeep off-road. We're testing the trailer today.
Well, that's it for this video. I've had that trailer for a long time. I've driven many tens of thousands of miles with it. And every time up till now, I always had to check my rear view mirrors to see where those tires were, to make sure the trailer tires were where I wanted them. Now, it doesn't matter. Wherever the vehicle goes, the trailer's right behind it. The extra width is gone. The worry about that is gone. The difficulty in gas stations gone. When I haul this trailer, I usually go hundreds to thousands of miles. So I load it once, and I drive for hours to days with a lot of restaurants and gas stations and hotels and things like that along the way. Making this drive easier is definitely better. It is definitely more difficult to load some vehicles. The Jeep, no problem. That Subaru, real pain. Anything that's low is going to be a real pain. Normally, I spend a lot more time driving than I do loading. So, for me, this works out great. The ease of maneuvering makes driving it a lot more fun. Hope you guys are having fun too. We'll see you next time. I had to stop and grab burrito supplies on the way home. Grocery store parking lot. Room to spare, room to spare. Whole thing fits in perfect. That makes stops a lot easier, everywhere.